I have always believed in miracles.
Many nations have looked with longing eyes towards Australia.
Today, a new spirit, a new enthusiasm, a new dynamism is at work in Australia. In an often troubled and dangerous world, here we are at the gateway of a new decade.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Maxim. We've got Ryan and Jack here.
What up?
So we're all here today, starting a new podcast. We're still working on the name of. But until then, we'll hopefully have an intro that will tell us the name of it before we're now talking about it.
We'll fix it in post. It'll be good.
But we've got a few topics today. Hopefully this podcast will be Ryan and I interviewing people from the public that we like to really find because we're really concerned. We often hear this idea of the quiet Australians, especially Scott Morrison in the last election was this is a victory for quiet Australians, and we're not quite sure if we're really talking to the quiet Australians, in those elections.
Or people on the ABC that say they are the quiet Australians.
Yeah, exactly. So I think
find the real quiet Australians and make them loud. Make sure they don't have a throat problem.
Because we don't hear a lot of voices in on the ABC, on Sky News, on any of the major media organisations. So we thought we'd bring Jack in. Jack is a member of the LNP.
Yep.
He's not he's a hack, but he's not quite a hack yet. He hasn't got any paid work.
Not yet.
And for clarification, I am a member of the ALP, and I'm more of a hack because I've had paid work.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely not winning the hack argument here.
So if I become paid, does that mean I'm a full hack, or am I still partisan?
No, full hack.
All right.
As soon as you get paid work from the party, hack.
Okay. I'm waiting for that day to happen. I can't wait.
Ryan isn't a member of any party.
Just for make this easy on all of us, just independent. We'll roll with that for now. I am not a hack of any political party. Unless Otto von Bismarck was still alive today. Beyond that, independent. So
yeah.
I have a much more, I guess, FDR kind of hope for Australia, and that's how I apply it to both parties. And I think they're both not great.
Okay.
So I think that'd be good for us to have these kind of discussions, because we've got obviously a bit two rather politically aligned people here, but we've also got someone who isn't very politically aligned.
Oh, God, no. Not at all. No.
But I think what would be interesting today is we've got the COVID situation. How do we feel? Do we feel it's over? Because at the moment we're hearing this is recorded on May the 7th. Mm-hmm. So at the moment we're hearing we've got the restrictions being loosened in Queensland. I think the numbers are decreasing. Do we feel like it's over, or do we feel like it's still we've got a long way to go?
I still think it's a long way to go. Definitely a very, very long way to go now. Possibly months and months and months, and we're not even thinking about even traveling to New Zealand for the next couple of months as well. Jacinda Ardern and Scott Morrison have been trying to negotiate and put together that Trans-Tasman travel plan. I think was it? Yeah. So I don't think it's over. I mean, we were able to join here today anyway, because we're allowed two additional people in the house. At the time of this recording, that could change obviously, but I mean, even in South Australia, for Mother's Day you can have up to 10 people. But again,
how luxurious, how great.
10 people. But I think what's gonna I'd give it roughly until maybe December, before things start getting really back to normal again.
I think so. But I think it's at least 6 months or something like that.
Well, until there's a vaccine. And the current numbers now, there's 6,822 cases and 95 deaths, which is great because, America's the thing. So if you want to see how bad things can get, look at the US. But
I'm constantly baffled by how they're dealing with that, by the way. I am constantly in bewilderment of how that...
This is the real, I think, a really interesting question to me is so you've got the state system in the US, which I think is a dumpster fire. You've got this system where individual governors can just make ad hoc decisions without any kind of coalition or they're not considering their neighbors, right?
Well, we have COAG, so I don't know why the United States doesn't have something like that. Oh, and for reference, COAG is the Coalition of Australian Governments, so that's all the state federal and territorial leaders.
But I think it's also just the relationship. You know what I mean? Like, we've got the engineers' decision in the 1920s, which basically made sure that the federal government had the overall say pretty much in everything the states do in a lot of ways. Like, the states have agreed on some things, but that engineers' decision basically changed the balance of power. For them, they've still got this whole states' rights kind of mentality, let alone the actual agreements. But Trump obviously came out and said, the governors open up, the economy's suffering, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But a bunch of them didn't agree with that, and a bunch of them did, so it's now just created this
massive divide, especially when because in Texas, for instance, they've what I've seen on the news and especially on the radio, they've started mass gatherings again, and there was like this massive over 200 person wedding that was going on while the infection rates are still climbing up really high.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys have no you have no right to stop the lockdowns of any kind, because there wasn't really a lockdown to start with. Maybe possibly in New York, where that's considered the epicenter of the virus. But in terms of all the other states, they've got the opportunity to try and decrease the spread, but they're not taking it. And that's what's really frustrating probably the world right now. And I don't think travel to the US is probably even the world is going to be back to normal until possibly mid or late 2021. That's what a lot of experts have been saying, especially a lot of doctors.
So. I think because my fear there's two fears I've got, is that we've got a situation where this we open up too quickly, and I have a funny feeling we might be doing that now. I'm not exactly sure. Because I've got a friend who works in Queensland Health, and he was saying to me, we're opening up way too quickly. But he's only in low level of Queensland Health, so he's not high management, seeing all the data come in. But nonetheless, he was saying we're opening up too quickly. But on the other hand, I'm worried that the second wave, I'm worried a Spanish flu scenario where it comes in 3 waves, and the first wave is not that bad, but it's bad, but it's not as bad. The second wave is disastrous. And the third wave is the least bad, but nonetheless, it still wipes out 100,000 people or so,
Yeah.
That's kind of the situation I'm worried about, where we open up again, and then it just goes through the whole thing, and then it mutated, and it's all over.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to think about it. No matter what happens inside of Australia, the borders are still going to be closed. International travel and trade is still going to be restricted because of the virus. And all of this is up in the air until there's a vaccine that's nationally available, and we get as many people vaccinated. Until that point, there will be waves. If you let people back in, if Josh Frydenberg's you know what, let's open the borders. Let's bring everyone in. And then all of a sudden, all these people who are infected by corona, they come into the country. We have new outbreaks across the entire country.
Yeah.
That's not fear-mongering either, by the way. That happened in Indonesia. Indonesia recently had one of its largest spikes in cases. China is going through its second wave right now.
Oh, sorry, there's no cases in China. What are you talking about?
No. Oh, that's right. That's right. They've only got 60,000 cases over there. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
no, because
right.
but even
reporting numbers for 3 weeks.
Yeah, but even then, it's a show that in Wuhan, where the virus pretty much started. They decided to open up the markets back up again. They decided to ease the restrictions of the lockdown, and now they're experiencing that second wave again. Obviously because the numbers that they were reporting weren't accurate. And this isn't just some conspiracy theory peddled nonsense, because usually I'm a bit skeptical on those things. It's would they really not be doing that? But you see all the videos, you see all the health professionals and all the doctors over there in China, and they're all saying the same thing, and I could probably trust a medical professional over the China Communist Party.
Well, right? Yeah, I think you got two things there, where it's I think on some hand, I think they are lying about the numbers, but there are some people who are saying that the Chinese purposely did this, which I think is taking it way too far.
Yes,
it's not a bioweapon. No.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bioweapon. I think I think they're lying probably, and it's classic.
It's not maybe they are.
It's classic. Any communist regime. You think of the Soviets in the 1980s with the AIDS virus. They're that's a Western.
A nuclear disaster is not possible in the Soviet Union.
We're not having a nuclear disaster. It's classic. They're always going to lie about this stuff. Yeah. But maybe making a bioweapon that's taking it to another step.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, the best story about that, and which demonstrates that Beijing's been lying about their numbers, is in Wuhan they released all the urns of all the people who died and were cremated. I don't know what the official death toll in China is, but I know they haven't said it was 5,000, but 5,000 urns from corona victims were given to families, which makes you scratch your head and go, this is one city.
Yeah.
This is one city in China, like 5,000 dead.
And it's also the fact that they closed down all those major cities like Shenzhen, Beijing, and all that. Like they closed all of those major cities with millions of people in them, and there were only like a couple of thousand cases. It's like a lot of people had the same theories in their heads. They were like, well, why are you shutting down millions and millions of people's worth of cities? Like, when you've only got a couple of thousand cases and you've apparently got it, quote unquote, under control. Like, it's a mess. It's the whole situation there is an utter mess. And obviously, people think that the Chinese people are, completely oblivious to this. Well, I've seen Weibo chats and all that where that's obviously not the case, at all. Like that, the people are just as skeptical as the Chinese Communist Party as we are.
Yeah.
But
well, you often find I think Vietnam's a really interesting example of this. It's obviously a different relationship, but in Vietnam, for example, they don't love the Communist Party. It's a communist country, all this other stuff, but they really love Ho Chi Minh. He's a really important figure, and the Communist Party's attachment to that is important. At the same time, they don't trust the Communist Party. They don't love the Communist Party. I'm sure some do, but there is a great skepticism of the Communist Party in Vietnam by its own people.
And all of this is important when you are talking about Corona, because you see how Vietnam dealt with it. It was pretty good.
Yeah, Vietnam's
warnings
done
out.
pretty well.
Granted, there was a bit of fuck the Chinese. No one from China is allowed in my restaurant, and those signs were throughout Saigon, and I'm still going to call it Saigon. I am not calling it Ho Chi Minh City. It's Saigon until the day I die.
is this a hot take? Is this considered a hot take?
Yeah, Constantinople, not Istanbul.
I think it was. I had a friend who went to Vietnam, and she's got Vietnamese heritage and Chinese heritage, and she went to Vietnam with her family. And she was in Ho Chi Minh City, and there was a restaurant called Saigon something. And I was like, it's just so weird to me. I was like, you purposely changed the city's name from Saigon to Ho Chi Minh City because you were like, we're screw the South. We're going to make sure this is an important communist hub. But no, restaurants that have opened up are called Saigon for Westerners, maybe? I have no idea. It's quite strange.
That's a bit weird.
This will be a great theme about the inconsistencies of communism, as will be talked about throughout the rest of this series. But for now, you can go and see that skepticism of government is really feeding a lot of what's happened when responding to the virus. Just using Vietnam, China, and us as an example. Vietnam did well. China just went, you know what? Let's read 1984. Let's get the instruction manual out, and let's just go forward with that. And so when you can lock down 500 million people to stop the spread of an outbreak, and that shows you the kind of power and control that they have. And what the purpose of all of this is. Their purpose of stopping the virus was to stop people questioning the power of the CCP. Now look back to us. End of the day, depending on how we deal with it will depend on the faith that the people have in our government and in the current government of dear old ScoMo. And all these questions are important. If a second wave comes, it will jeopardize people's faith in the government and people's faith in the Morrison administration. I prefer it that way.
So here's an interesting question though: is how do you feel each state has dealt with this?
I feel like Queensland's done a really good job, especially because our cases have gone down to single digits every day. New South Wales is probably a bit probably my biggest issue is the cruise ship, and I think a lot of people's biggest problems with the cruise ship, and probably the two nursing homes, especially Newmarch was the latest one, and then sorry, what was that other one called again? The other nursing home.
No, that was the cruise ship. The other nursing home in North Sydney.
Because there were two nursing homes. There were two nursing homes that got infected there, and but I think also Daniel Andrews in Victoria did a really good job as well. I think there's some controversy now going on with some factory of some sorts. I can't remember if they produce meat or something like that, but there's some controversy going on there. The government apparently knew that there were infections there, but they still left the factory open apparently. Again, this is all just this is all kind of like hearsay. We won't really know until after all this is over. South Australia haven't really done too much research, but if they can have people gather up to 10 people and the health professionals are saying that that's okay, then that's pretty good as well. And Western Australia, I haven't done any research, so I've no idea what's going on there.
I
Same with
think I
Northern,
largely agree with that.
same with Northern Territory.
Yeah.
Well, Northern Territory was the first of any of the entities that we have that said no new cases, which shows you how good they dealt with it.
Yeah.
And also how many measures were taken by the other states surrounding the Northern Territory to close their borders off and make sure that it doesn't spread to the regional communities. But when it comes to WA, they are now effectively their own country. Like how
Well, they've always wanted.
Yeah. Well, they're effectively as big as one, so
look, Westralia will rise up and they shall use the virus as their chance. Now,
that's it.
no, but how WA's done is pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
they've had one death.
Okay.
I think this one death, and it was from the folks on that cruise ship that went to Japan. So old dude from Perth, like cool. One person died. That's pretty good numbers. How they dealt with the cruise ship situation, because they had one went into Perth. I can't remember what the name is. It was a German cruise ship.
Yeah, it was a German one. They I think they left that offshore. They never actually ended up letting them go in unless everybody on board was tested.
Yeah.
Which is what should have happened with the Ruby Princess. Apparently there were a couple people that did testing, but then they let everyone off the ship pretty much with no
Just don't get it.
They knew that they were getting tested for it, so why didn't even the border force, right? Like yeah, right. This is probably the state government's fault, but even then, the border force should have been able to enforce some type of like temperature testing or anything like that. Like they should have done that.
Yeah.
But for some reason it doesn't, and I don't know, like, because all three of us are able to pick up, like, that's common sense.
Yeah,
How are the people in charge not noticing that common sense?
As much as I am a fan of shitting on the New South Wales state government,
There's a lot to shit about on that one,
oh god, yeah,
especially the tram.
don't even start me with the tram.
It's the slowest tram in the world. No, I've personally went on that tram in December before I went on my cruise in December. I went on that tram while it was still free.
Okay.
And literally when it was turning corners, we were moving slower than people walking. If I paid money for that, I would have felt like I got ripped off, even if it was just like $1 or something like
amazing.
that. Apparently they're speeding up the tram speed or whatever, but if it, like, you know, if it has the capability to go faster, then why not make it go faster? Like,
But
I
also,
don't know.
like, Sydney's a mess of a city. I like, it's just.
yeah, it
I
is.
haven't been there. I wasn't there when the tram was there, but just like,
Yeah.
the traffic is insane.
It is.
Like, like Melbourne's also insane, but it's, I don't know. Like when I was there, like it's manageable, but it's still crazy. But Sydney, when I was there, was just like, oh,
shit,
my
yeah.
god.
Well, I mean, to take it this way, if you manage to fuck up a tram worse than Tom Tate did,
Yeah.
like if your ability to install infrastructure is worse than the Gold Coast City Council's,
That's pretty bad.
yeah, pretty bad. And so obviously, as much as it'd be wise to shit on Gladys and the state government, how they dealt with it, there's other entities and other folks who need to get the blame more often. Like, yes, how the state government dealt with it was terrible. But yeah, as you said, Border Force, like someone with half a fucking brain cell should have gone,
I think this swerves actually to a broader point.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just like, you know, Ryan and I have had this discussion about the meritocracy.
Yep.
How do you feel about the meritocracy? Do you feel like the meritocracy in Australia is working? Do you feel like the people who should be in the positions of power are in those positions?
Probably not.
You can say some are.
But
You can say, but I would argue mostly not.
mostly, well, look, especially when you've got, you know, some people that have just had political careers all their lives and they haven't really had any much expertise in other fields, who are particularly leading the country, then I don't, you know, there are some people that are like, you know, health ministers that have never like been a doctor, never actually experienced had that experience in that field, and I think experience is everything, you know,
for sure.
especially when you're trying to, you know, but I forgot what point I was trying to go to again.
Well, the meritocracy.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily think it's working too well here, especially because of how politically disengaged we are. Like we wouldn't know what a person's background is like at all. Like not an average Australian anyway.
Yeah.
Like probably most who are like politically engaged. Yes, they would know. But even if someone like, you know, me, who started to become a lot more politically engaged when I was like 16, and I didn't even know who my local member was, like until I was 18.
Yeah.
Like, you know. am I going to know the background of that person that I'm voting for? No. Like, if I didn't even know who my local member was, so how the hell am I going to know their background? Like, you know, I don't think...
But I think the other question is, like, a local member not only does, like, has meant to do, like, some of that meritocratic?
Meritocratic, yeah.
Yeah,
work. That'd be the way.
Yeah. We'll find out.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, not only do they have to work in their field, like, when they become a minister or something, they often have to deal with, like, regular people, and that's a whole other ball game. Like, you have to deal with the local crazies or, like, local, like, lovely people, but you have to go to all their meetings. Like, that kind of dedication to your local area, that's not always concurrent with someone who might be like a rocket scientist. Like, they might be fantastic at science, and they might be like, oh yes, you put me as a science minister, which I don't have anymore, but if we had a science minister, you know, they would be in that position, and they'd be like, oh, red hot, this is so good for me. But then they'll be like maybe the shittest local member.
Yeah. but you know, with that being said though, whether these politicians end up having like the appropriate background for what portfolio they're given, like, you know, we are especially in terms of this coronavirus, we are consulting healthcare professionals and, all that aren't necessarily politicians themselves, but we are getting advice from the experts.
Yeah.
So, maybe you could say that maybe politicians don't necessarily have to have that experience, but as long as they're, this is purely hypothetical. I don't necessarily if I believe this, but
point the right people,
Yeah.
And there is an issue there, which is at what point do you create an internal technocratic system of managing everything? Because a logic would be that let's say your federal member goes into a meeting and there's scientists and virologists and all the people who are experts in their field, and for the last 3 days, this is all hypothetical, but they've all come and made a plan. It's like, here is from our research and our skill and our expertise, here's the plan for dealing with the coronavirus. Do you just take it because a bunch of experts said, that's what we should do? I mean, because you might read that plan, and that plan might be like, oh, look, 5,000 people have to die for this to work efficiently. So it's really you have to walk a tightrope, because you can end up like some other examples in the coronavirus, like the global fuckery that has happened. You can not listen to your experts, be like Great Britain, where at the start of this they said, what would be a bloody good idea? What if we did herd immunity naturally at the start of this, and we forcibly let the virus spread throughout the entire population, spiking it? Oh bollocks, that didn't work out pretty well. Okay, soldiers on the streets of London.
Well, also Boris Johnson also made sure he shook hands with all the COVID-19 patients that were in the hospital. He made sure he did that. Yeah. And then he ended up getting it. So, not exactly the smartest person on the planet.
Gasp, shock, or who would have thought?
But, you could kind of tell that he was like humbled by that experience a little bit, and he actually started to take it somewhat seriously. I mean, I think that's probably. I'm sorry, I'm kind of derailing the point that you were making there, but
it's
well,
actually the same.
You take a famous historical example is something like the what's it called, the Bay of Pigs, where they were all the advisors were telling Kennedy, invade Cuba, take out the communists in Cuba. And then that whole situation could have led to a nuclear war, where his advisors were saying, first strike, we'll take them out before they can hit us first, kind of thing. And then he was like, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to risk a nuclear war.
Well, and that's the biggest point, which is, at the end of the day, you can only, the meritocracy that we have. Look, your advisors can be wrong at some point. And how you deal with a crisis comes down to you as a person. Because another great example, not talked about much, is Turkmenistan. And some of the stands. How Turkmenistan has dealt with this is coronavirus is now illegal.
Just illegal.
What I mean by that is
the glorious leader has decided.
Yes.
Is this actually serious? Has the leader actually said it's illegal?
I am deadly serious.
Oh my god.
No, okay, look, when I mean coronavirus is illegal, you can't ban a virus, but you can ban people saying coronavirus, which is what the Turkmen government has done. Which, so if you get caught hearing someone saying COVID-19 or coronavirus, the police will lock your ass up.
Jesus.
And secondly, face masks. also banned. Because it scares people. So if you get caught wearing a face mask in Turkmenistan, your ass gets locked up into jail.
I'd hate for anyone in Turkmenistan to go to Japan then if that's actually what scares them, because in just that region of Asia,
China,
like
really?
you know,
Yeah.
China, South Korea, and Japan, like wearing a mask to try and prevent the spread from others is very commonplace. It's not
Without COVID, they will regularly wear, just because of the pollution. Like, if you go to Beijing, it's very polluted, and people in the street are wearing face masks. And when I was there in like 2017, like when I went to Beijing, there was everyone, like not everyone, but a lot of people wearing face masks just because of the pollution, let alone anything else.
Yeah. And then on top of that, the Turkmen president, the glorious leader that he is, genius. He wrote a book about how to deal with the coronavirus, which I've made illegal saying, but I've wrote it on a book.
Is it spelt slightly differently though, coronavirus? So it's not technically illegal, but he gets away with it.
Western disease. Or something.
Well, no, I can imagine it's with a K. So
The Eastern disease. You know?
like the Russian way of doing it, where it's like, see, no, we put the K there. Yeah, it's different now. So he wrote it and said the best way to treat coronavirus is by eating lots of garlic and getting your vitamin C and getting all your essential oils. Basically, the Turkmen president is a big douchey version of like a anti-vax mum.
Right. So see, that kind of reminds me of Gina Reinhardt's like way of trying to deal with it. Like she in, I think it was the Western Australian or something like that. She had like a 2-page spread cover basically about how she said she was going to deal with the coronavirus, and basically she just said drink boiling water, and that'll heat up your immune system. Hence, the virus will get killed, even though it's an all year round type virus. Because you've got to remember, like Northern Hemisphere, right? They're still in winter. Well, we're still in like summer here, and we still got cases here, like because they thought that the virus is going to warm up and it will eventually like die out in summer.
Yeah.
But that's not the case at all. That's not what a lot of healthcare or even like scientists and doctors are saying. That's how it works. It's going to be an all year round thing with this coronavirus, especially.
It goes to show you that just because you have billions of dollars does not make you very smart.
We've got the US president as well. I just want to throw this one in. What's the thing he wants to inject people to inject?
Disinfectant into their bloodstream. That's it.
Yeah. And there was something else. He's been pushing this this chemical. I forgot what it's called. Hydroxychloroquine. I don't know, something like that.
Had
it, yeah. That one as well. He's been pushing a bunch of different cures, and he said it would be over by May because of the temperature changes and
because it's gonna get hot, people. So hot.
Actually, what you said about Turkmenistan banning the word coronavirus, it kind of reminds me of that meme where it's like, if coronavirus is trying to enter your body, just say no. And because the coronavirus cannot legally enter your body without consent. It reminds me of that meme when he just bans the word coronavirus. Like, because I thought when you first said it, like he was going to ban the word coronavirus, hence the coronavirus can't exist in Turkmenistan because of that. But it's just so he can't get people to talk about it, which is exactly what a dictator should do. I
wish it was that ridiculous. I wish it was like, no, it's banned. You're not allowed in Turkmenistan. It's like, glorious leader has banned virus. Virus is no longer here. Zero cases. Isn't he also the same leader that banned gay marriage but still allows lesbian marriages to occur?
Oh, I'm sure.
I think that's one of the
stand presidents. Yeah. Like it could have been Kyrgyzstan or something like one of those obscure post-Soviet republics. So they're all cooked. But it goes to show you like how all this relates to Australia. By the way, after that giant tangent is, and just back to meritocracy, is you can take the route of being completely idiotic, and just banning the word and pretending it doesn't exist. Or you can go and take the route of not listening to your advisors. Actually, we mentioned America before. Listening to your advisors might also be a bad idea. The reason a lot of what Trump has said is because Jared Kushner told him that these things were happening.
Right.
Because he was just saying it off the cuff. Trump takes it in, trusts his son-in-law, then goes out and says that these things are happening. Like the whole Google debacle, where it's like, oh, Google's making this software that will track cases. And Google came out and said, no fucking I'm not. What the fuck are you talking about? A lot of this comes down to Jared Kushner telling the president shit that wasn't real. And then when Trump realized this shit wasn't real, he loses his mind in the White House. And like,
Well, actually, what's interesting about that, though, is this is still on the subject of Trump, but I was watching a video this morning that Jordan Shanks posted on his self-help channel.
Yeah.
And
God.
look, while I have some of my issues with Friendly Geordies as the channel, I think his self-help stuff is really good.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's quality stuff, quality advice and all that. And I think because he said something like, Trump doesn't have a filter, like, am I saying, because most humans, us pretty much, like, we usually think about what we're saying before we're going to say it, or we at least have some kind of filter and then say, okay, is what I'm about to say really stupid or really dumb?
Yeah.
But he doesn't seem to have that filter at all. So when he says, inject stuff with, inject,
Sunlight or
disinfectant into your bloodstream, he's not really thinking about, is that stupid?
Yeah.
Like, he's just saying it straight away. Like, he exudes that much confidence that he can, say it and think he can get away with it. Obviously, he'll be on the media. Like, he was on the world's media pretty much for saying that because of how ridiculous it sounded. But, it just shows that he exudes that much confidence that he just, he thinks he knows what he's talking about. And then he just says it. And then he just allows, to test the waters a bit, maybe, but he doesn't have that filter. And I think that was a really interesting observation, doesn't have that filter at all. So, definitely interesting.
It's true. He just shoots off the cuff. The problem is that...
Just hold it for a second. We'll talk, I think we should talk about Trump, but we should also, we should drop into the US primary.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because opposition's a corpse.
So we've got Trump, right, and he's just getting away with saying anything. But we've also got, the US primary has just pretty much ended. Well, it ended a couple of weeks ago, really.
Yeah.
And he's now out. It's just Biden.
I'm a bit disappointed about that.
A little bit.
It's definitely not good. I think even, I don't know if anyone, there was 3 people running against Trump in the Republican primary, but I think there was only one left, I think, by this point. I'm not even sure if he's still running. It was like Bill Weld or something.
Oh, yeah. One
there
of
was
those...
that woman as well. Elizabeth Warren was still in the running for that one as well, as of a couple of weeks back, or...
She's gone now.
Oh, okay.
She dropped out before Bernie did.
It's all done and dusted.
Yeah, so but then she was people were worrying who she's going to endorse, and then she didn't endorse anyone, and then everyone was pissed off about which one she didn't endorse. So yeah, it's complicated, but I think it was I think we're stuck in a pretty, I don't know. It's part of me is always like, I think you should vote for the lesser of two evils. Obviously, I think Labour Party is a better choice, and so in the US, I think Democrats obviously would be a better choice than Trump. However, it's really hard to argue for Biden.
Yeah, I mean, at least with Bernie, right? Like, he's been saying the same stuff for 40 years plus.
Yeah.
He's been very consistent on his policy, outcomes and and the stuff that he says. I see some of the videos that you share on Facebook, for instance. I give him watch sometimes, and look, some of the stuff that he says, as I said 40 years ago, he's still saying now, and that's something that you don't see a lot of politicians do. But I also think that he had the energy, despite his age. He had more energy than Biden, and I think Trump has a lot of energy, Bernie has a lot of energy, so I thought it was a no-brainer to fight energy with energy, but at the same time,
decided there was a different. They felt something different.
Yeah, but but it's. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Definitely.
Look, I'm dreading a debate between.
Sorry, the mic went down. Yes, I'll continue.
I'm dreading a
my
debate.
hopes in a better America.
I'm dreading a debate between Biden and Trump. I think it's going to be a slaughter. I just don't know what because here's the thing though with Joe Biden. My slight defense. Because Joe Biden doesn't believe in anything. I don't think he does.
Naturally,
but you can take this incredible weakness and turn it into a total if you're totally shameless, make it a strength by saying, because I don't believe in anything, I'm just going to believe in all the positions you want me to believe in. You know what I mean? I will back Medicare for all, which is polling popular, Green New Deal. You don't not necessarily those. Pick other things that are popular. It doesn't matter. But if you're going to throw this candidate that has a long history of changing his opinions, backing things and then retracting them, a long sordid history of not being ideologically consistent whatsoever, why are you making him why are you shoehorning him? You know what I mean? Why are you putting him in a box and saying he is going to be the sensible, stable, meritocratic, you know what I mean? He is going to be this candidate that everyone will want. It's bewildering what they're trying to do.
All of that Plus, he's sexually assaulted less women than Trump. So that's a plus, I guess.
Really sad how we've gotten to that point now.
Yeah.
God damn. Yeah. Looking at the American political process now, if I ever want to feel sad, I open CNN and I just read it, because you had like Bernie, for all of his flaws and all the things that could have made people not vote for him. As you mentioned before, that energy, because he actually believes what he's saying.
Yeah.
And you can mobilize a population behind a charismatic person who actually believes what they're saying. But then this isn't Democratic voters in and of themselves.
Yeah.
This is mainly the DNC and the media, who, I know, the greatest punching bags when it comes to this. Oh, my favorite person didn't win because the media.
That's 2016 politics. That's what it was back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, and nothing's changed. And you had this person with raw energy, a person who the DNC could take and could very much win with, a good candidate. But no, because he thinks and believes in things that are against their ideas, their agendas, and who their donors really want, and what their donors really want. Because America is just this modern Venetian republic that's a oligarchy, basically. So they don't care about freedom. Like in the same way that the Republicans are just merchant, politicians are like, oh, I don't give a fuck about poor people. Now they're being honest about it. So, good on them.
Well, it also doesn't help. It also doesn't help the Democrats either that that a lot of right wing media has a big share of the country's media influence. As much as right wing media and right wing YouTube and right wing talk show hosts like to convince you that we're actually the little guys, we're dealing with the big establishment up there, but it's like no, you see how many views Fox News gets. You see how many news Stephen Crowder gets on YouTube and stuff millions and millions of views, and you can't say that they're the little guys anymore. They're big mainstream voices.
Well, look, if you get money from the Koch brothers, if you have direct contacts with people in the Republican Party, you are not a little guy. But by no definition of the term little guy are you little if you have contact with billionaires, funding from major donors to the Republican Party. And you can bring on Republican Party officials. Stephen Crowder brought on Ted Cruz. A big member of the Republican Party. Not anymore, I guess. But no, these people, they want to pretend that we're fighting against the rest of the establishment, even though we take a giant chunk of that establishment.
But this is the thing, though. Like, the Republicans are good at it. That's the thing. They're really good at marketing. They win those arguments because they can brand themselves.
Well, they're the business party,
and also they're totally shameless. Like, they will argue they're the little guy despite all facts pointing to the opposite. But they're really good, and they all hold together as well. Like, they all hold in one legion and say, no, we're actually speaking all the same tune. We've all spoken to each other beforehand. We all know what the talking points are. We're not going to break the mold. Democrats, on the other hand, break the mold, fight each other.
But what's interesting though? It's like these political commentators and whatnot. Like, there's so many inconsistencies. There's so many things that if you just think about it for more than a minute, not a lot of their points kind of hold up. But I think people, and you could say this in Australia as well, which is another thing that I have a problem with politics, is that people are more interested with a narrative than they are actually dealing with the facts and the figures and whatnot. Especially when it comes to that little guy, big guy, populism. That's an extremely popular narrative to go with because there's a clear evil and a clear good guy. Especially when politics is so messy and muddled, and there's so many grey areas. When you put it so easily and simple for people, that's when you get the most support because it's simple and easy to break down.
And that's exactly it. That's I think the double-edged sword, because you want in some ways, and this is just a reality. I think you're never going to get to a point where everyone is totally invested in politics. But at the same time, you also don't want to make it too simple. It's just because the other thing is it's a breakdown complicated topic sometimes is just such a no one wants to hear it. No one you've probably, I don't know if you've experienced this, Jack, but you'll be having a conversation about politics and everyone's like, shut the fuck up. We don't want to talk about this right now.
It's I really didn't want to hear all that. You could have stopped 10 minutes ago talking, but
Well, not to explode into rant town, but let's be honest, I fucking hate that kind of view of from our population and the general Western view, because I grew up on classics, and I remember I remember what Plato and Aristotle thought about all of this. Political animal and all.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's kind of true. Like, if you think about it, politics affects everything. It's like, oh, I don't like politics. Really, the fact that you're not getting paid more money this quarter is because of some decision made in Canberra or in Brisbane. The fact that your healthcare sucks more now is because of decisions made in Canberra or Brisbane. Like, just because we're from Queensland,
responses to emergencies,
hence, like, go to the coronavirus. I mean, how a government decides to do something, how politics, look, politics can be a big wank. I get all of that, right?
It can be. I agree.
Yeah, I'm friends with lots of socialists. Trust me. It can be a real big, like, talk wank about ideas that get nowhere. But politics is more than that. It's decisions. It's policy as well. And then, I really I despise that kind of idea from people. So just ran over.
But I think we should move to the next topic for this opening bit. What are your? I guess I'll be you, Jack. What are your worries for the next, say, next year, and then I'll go for the next 5 years for Australia.
What rustles your jimmies?
Probably the next year is how we deal with the coronavirus. That's probably we've already had an extensive discussion about that a couple minutes earlier, but I definitely feel again, this is a new thing that we have to deal with, right? Like, this is a new threat. Like, we're so prepared for war, but we weren't prepared for this invisible enemy. Like, we straight up weren't. Like, and most other countries weren't. So I'm hoping that when we get out of this, we'll come out stronger on the other end, and we'll at least have, we'll know what to do next time, and not necessarily just forget about it and just say, oh well, this is like a once in a generation thing that'll happen. Like, it's a pretty big event. Like, we're going through.
This is the thing. I think we had a lot of precursors to this. This is the thing. We had the Ebola crisis. We had a bunch of these things, because I think wasn't it Ebola a few years ago, like 2014 roughly. There was an outbreak. And everyone was really worried about how far it was going to spread. But thankfully, the UN got in there. They closed it down really quick. There was a bunch of investment from the US. And then, it was over. Within, I don't know how long.
They also declared it a global pandemic pretty early as well. Which was interesting when you see their reaction to Ebola as compared to China. But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different time. But yeah, so probably to answer that question, I'd say probably in the next year is one, how we're going to economically recover from this, because obviously, because I always had the theory that before this was happening that it's going to affect us economically harder than it will physically, and from most parts of that is somewhat true right now. Obviously, there are people that are dying in hospitals, and that's not good. Under any circumstance, that's not good. But it kind of
situation could make it much worse.
Yeah, and that kind of what worries me, because I was listening to the old-fashioned ancient radio 2 days ago, and in my car, and basically they were saying that they weren't going to increase taxes to try and get the Josh Frydenberg was saying that they weren't going to increase taxes to try and get the economy back going. We're gonna try and develop a more developed economy. Now, whatever that looks like, it's very vague. It's not really.
What the fuck does that mean?
But I thought that was inevitable. Increasing taxes, that would have necessarily, and that would have been one way to try and recover from this, because naturally the money's got to go back somehow, and obviously it's not free money. It comes from somewhere. We have to try and get it back. But yeah, those are probably my two things: like how we're going to recover and how economically we're going to recover from this.
Next 5 years, then.
5 years, political engagement.
Yeah.
Yep, easily, because especially with the next generation of people, my sister, she's about to vote this year. She's turning 18 this year, and she doesn't know anything about politics. If she could have voted in the federal election, she would have voted for Clive Palmer, just as a meme. And actually, news about that: Clive Palmer might be going for the state election this year, and that's why he's bought over $400,000 worth of however you pronounce that drug, chloroquine. He's bought over $400,000 worth of that to help Queensland hospitals and stuff like that, because
I hate him.
because he wants to run a stake in the state election. Hopefully, he doesn't get in, but he's
literally outside of the country. So
maybe him and Pauline can battle it out and not supposedly cancel each other out. That'd be the ideal scenario.
But probably political engagement, and definitely education about our policies, because you're taught about politics at a very young age, roughly around about 11 or 12. Because I learnt about all about everything about politics in year year 7.
You taught it at school.
Yeah. So
right.
so I was around 12 years old.
Yeah.
And obviously I was not interested in it at all. Like, you know, we did the Canberra trip and everything, and that did not interest me at all whatsoever. The only person I cared about seeing was either Julia Gillard or Tony Abbott, because those were the two politicians at the time that were on TV. Right. Those were the only things that I cared about. But when now I would have appreciated that trip much more, because I'm so much more engaged. But I think, like, you know, a more educated voter base is generally better for democracy, because then,
I would say so.
Because it's less likely that you'll probably give into, you know, the Clive Palmers of the world. You know, you're less likely to give into those types of people, right? And you're actually able to make solid decisions based on what you think is going to best benefit you, your family, or everyone else in your community, right? And I think those are probably my two big problems in the next 5 years: is engagement and what was the other thing I was talking about as well?
I guess political and like.
Oh, education. That's right.
Yeah,
So education and politics. I think we should. Personally, I think the curriculum should be teaching a little bit later, especially in high school, because, well, one, you still can't vote yet, even when you're in high school. Like, your minimum age is 18, probably around about maybe 16 even, to start learning about politics stuff. Because you can enroll to vote at 16, you just can't vote.
Okay, I was going to say, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, those are my two big problems in the next 5 years, especially in Australia.
For the next year or so.
Oh, where do we start? Okay. I guess I'll echo some of the sentiments. My biggest issue is, economic recovery, but how we set the tone of that economic recovery. So my own personal opinion is this: I think Corona has been very, very good. Not in the sense of people dying, obviously, but like it showed the cracks in the system.
Yeah.
I mean, there was 1 month of fuel reserves in the entire country, which is not good if things get really, really bad, because nobody thought a crisis could happen. What I'd really like to see, if these guys want to get the economy back on track, and the only way you can do it is not some, you know, mediocre response of, oh, we want a more developed economy, but no more taxes. How do you get money anyway? Rather than doing that, what you need is like a New Deal, like an FDR style New Deal, the originally named New Deal, or a 5-year plan, Joseph Stalin style. Like, look, as meme worthy as that statement is, if you want to get shit back on track, it has to be aggressive, it has to be ambitious, it has to be quick, and it has to be managed appropriately, because those big ideas, like 5-year plan, failed because the Soviets didn't set objectives, and then they couldn't, and they made ludicrous like
quotas,
milestones and stuff. Yeah. So ignoring all of those, let's look to us. Like, Australia is sitting on, I guess, what you could call the cheat codes of countries. Like, no foreign enemies nearby that can come in and take all your shit. Educated population.
Relatively.
Relatively. Great infrastructure and institutions for things like research and development, innovation just in general, and all of that. The problem has been so far is how successive governments, once again, as easy as it is to shit on our beloved federal government and on ScoMo, as I like to do often, it's not just them, it's an internal systematic thing. My biggest problem right now is that Australians have been given an opportunity to make real, long-lasting change, and to make a response and a recovery that is fast, ambitious, and gets our 10% unemployed back to work. We have that possibility. We have the infrastructure and resources. My fear is that the government is not going to do it because ideology, or the fact that they fear risk, which obviously people should. But if you're a business party, if you're a party that's all about, we are about small business and all that, what comes with business? Risk management and risk mitigation. And if you believe in aggressive growth, like apparently they want, you got to take risks and you got to grow quickly. And that's my biggest fear in the next year, is that we don't do that. We let this opportunity slip away.
Yeah. So is that the next year? What about the next 5 years?
Next 5 years,
I'm giving you
Look.
5-year plan.
Look, so the gulags will be set up in Central Australia.
Oh my god.
The train infrastructure will get a lot of jobs. Like, but real talk, I guess, yeah. Look, education and politics. That's all you said was what I'm afraid of the next 5 years. But I'll just expand on it a little further. Is that our education system it's failing everybody. Where we still have this old school Prussian style of education, and that has the teacher and the students in nice orderly rows, and we're making more factory workers and more midwives and all that stuff. But the current education system in a lot of Western countries is based off that, but it is the education system of a world that no longer exists. We now have a very innovative world, a world where it's not so much just go into the factory, work your 9 to 5 and go home. You need to have some thought behind it. But while everything else in our economy is slowly innovating, our education system hasn't. And if you want to educate people on politics, well, you got to go a little further than that. That, in my own opinion, which is like you need to get. This is going to sound so bougie and wanky, but like philosophy. You have to teach people about why they believe what they believe. Because an educated person with no moral backbone is a dangerous thing. At least I believe.
Yeah.
Because you have to ingrain that into people, and then they can make educated opinions about what political route they want to go after high school and that. But we have to innovate in our education system and change that, not just more political education. So that's one.
Yeah.
Number two, it goes back to my first concern for the next year. It's what's the term I'm looking for? As vague and as airy-fairy as economics can be, that's the biggest concern. As much as I think Australia should have lots of little political revolutions everywhere, in the sense of the parties need to reform and change how they manage things. Smaller parties need to get more vocal. All of that. I believe that. Everything in our society is irrelevant if our economy is not ready to face the new 21st century economy. My biggest fear is that, it goes back to the first one. I think we have an opportunity to actually become a real middle power, a real strong economy, one that's built for the 21st century, one that benefits every Australian, even the rich people who fuck up our elections. So if you're listening and you 1%ers, even you get the
Give
benefit.
us some money.
But that kind of beautiful economic growth, an Australian society that actually has real political power in the geopolitical sense, a real economy that benefits every Australian, one that's not built on ideology. I'll give you a quick example. Homelessness in this country is going up, and it has been for years. Not like Venezuela levels of homelessness or anything that bad, or like Spain post 2008 homelessness, but it's going up. The only reason we haven't combated it yet, and the reason why, is because the federal government has no long-term strategy. There is no strategy for dealing with homelessness. All that's ideologically based, because fuck the homeless, they got there themselves. That's the mentality.
Themselves up by their bootstraps.
Absolutely. By the way, the Labour Party did the exact same thing. They set no comprehensive homelessness combat strategy, and all it would take, and we have examples of this, and this is economic in of its nature, so I'm not tangenting into something that's not related again. You give every one of those people homes, kind of like what's been done in Helsinki, what's been done in Utah, and other experiments everywhere.
Yeah, public housing.
Yeah. You get them off the street. That saves the taxpayer lots of money, because those homeless people aren't getting drunk or doing drugs or getting into fights, which affects our criminal system, which affects our healthcare system, and so on. It's a very big upfront investment, but over time the returns happen. If half of those people don't go back onto the streets, they become tax-paying citizens.
Yeah, on some level. Yeah.
That's not being done because of ideology, and that's being done because nobody gives a fuck.
Yeah. I mean,
that's my biggest. I just, to sum everything I've set up, I just want the government to give a fuck. That's it.
That's fair enough.
That's basically the sum of my 5-year concern. Is that we let foreign countries come in here and buy everything. Considering that Google has just, this is before the crisis, Google Wing came in and they're doing drone deliveries in Canberra.
Oh wow.
The CIA have a thing called InQtel, which is their investment fund that got set up in Sydney last year. Yes, a foreign powers intelligence agency has a $2 billion investment fund that's buying up Australian small businesses and SMEs. So never mind the Chinese, everyone else is coming here to buy our shit because we're not using our collective cultural, social, and economic capital to do anything with it for ourselves. So that's basically it. I just want our government to wake up.
Yeah. And I agree with you too. Like, you know, it's frustrating because we have ideally one of the best scenarios to be able to develop that economy.
Absolutely.
Especially because we have like some of the best resources in the world. We have like, you know, the infrastructure in place. You know, we're a first world country.
Yeah.
And we have that ability to do that, but we're not capitalizing on it. It's like, you know, it's like we're too lazy to do anything, like, you know, or we're not really focusing on it. But I hope with this virus that we start kicking it back into gear. I'm hopeful that we start maybe developing our own industries. Now, I'm not in the camp of saying, you know, 100% buy everything Australian, you know, because obviously
no, that's bad.
But because obviously, you know, our world has become globalized. You know, everything's being made everywhere. You know, products made in China. I mean, these microphones are made in China. You know, made in India, South Korea, whatever. Like all of these countries, like obviously you've still got to have good trade agreements with and all that stuff. But, you know, if we just have, you know, more industries that we can rely on, you know, I think that would be good for both us and then maybe for the rest of the world too.
I think, so I'll do me. So I think for the first year, I think, definitely, obviously, it's COVID on some levels because I'm worried a Spanish flu type scenario. But I think, obviously, I think really my real concern is the economic. Because I think the problems with the economy were long before COVID hit. COVID's just fastened all these problems that were sitting there ready to collapse and then just exposed them all. Because we've got a bunch of, like, not just, like, industries, but, like, commercial centers that were just sitting, like there and waiting for this to happen. Like I love going to the cinema, but it's not like cinemas are the big thing. They have been, you know, they've been dying for years.
Yeah.
And like, how are the cinemas going to
Netflix.
how are the cinemas going to recover from this? Probably not. Like, I love going to the cinema, but they're probably dead.
I mean, I haven't been to one in like ages and ages. Months and months apart.
Yeah, like this is what I mean. Like
the only person I know who actually likes going to the cinema is my partner, and it's for the experience. Otherwise, it's Netflix's Stan or something.
And this is what I mean. This articulates my exact point. Like we've got a bunch of these like industries that are always sitting on like a, you know, a very peculiar place, and now probably going to completely collapse. And I think, and I don't know how what do we replace the cinema with? Like the cinema's obviously one example, but you could list a bunch of others that were
Cinema 2, Electric Boogaloo.
You know what I mean, though. You get my point that like there is a bunch of things now that could have died years ago, but have not died, just because of like weird cultural trends or old people. But you know, if you kill all the old people, like, you know what I mean, or if you keep them inside, they stop going out, they stop going to the local RSL, like, you know what I mean? Like these things are dead. Like they're over. Like we're like, and they might not be necessarily important for us 20-year-olds, but we're going to get 50 at some point. We want to go to the karaoke bar.
Whatever that'll look like in the year 20, whatever.
Look, if I can't go to the RSL on Mars, I'll be really disappointed.
But you get my point. Is like that's what I'm really worried about. Is like our economy was heading towards this path, and we had not built industries like local industries, like you're talking about, Jack, or any industries or kind of methods to deal with this. Like, and then like this hits, and then we're like, oh wait, we, you know, because I think something like, you know, Qantas is maybe an example, like having our own
Guy Helen Choice.
but having our own like industries where we build like our own like parts for airplanes. Like we used to build our own airplanes, but now we build like parts that we ship over to build for the construction of airplanes. And I think that's good to have like specializations in certain industries, but I think it's sometimes good to have just at least a national owned industry in a certain particular area, like trains or whatever it might be, something that will be essential. Like you don't have to have it constantly active, but have it ready to use when we need it, kind of thing. Those strategies are there, because if we don't have it, I guess you could just nationalize stuff, but that, you know, that goes down its own path.
Hold back there, comrade.
But you get my point. Like, you know, I would rather have them sitting there like a national bank or something ready to kick in when we need it. Rather than it just having to like go emergency powers, nationalize everything straight away.
Well,
I'll go to my 5-year before you step in, Ryan. But just like, so for 5 years, I think I do sympathize with the education, because I did study to be a teacher for a little while. So in education, it was, the real concerns were there a lot of the time with like, just how the system was working. Like, like when I was studying teaching, I pretty much had like a cohort, I don't know, like 1,000 people. And I think maybe 10 of them wanted to actually be teachers. Like, most of them were doing it just to be a job. They were like, this is an easy job because the OP was quite low. I just do this, I'll work. That's all I care about. I just want a job. That's all,
Really?
No passion for teaching, you know what I mean? And this is obviously just my situation, ACU, but I'm sure you could take that and plant it somewhere else, in a similar situation. So I'm concerned. Like, I think that's really worrying. And that's obviously back in, like, for when I was doing it from, like, 2013, 2017, roughly. So obviously, could be maybe it's a revolution in educational kind of 20-year-olds, but...
I doubt it.
I really do doubt it.
But you get my point. If that was happening then, we're definitely in a probably situation now where we're probably worrying similarly where this could all go.
Well, here's a fun fact for you. So lots of people going into education and stuff. Do you know this country's running out of engineers?
Oh, yeah,
We're running out of engineers. There are not enough for all the jobs that we need. And you can't just... And now that we can't bring them from overseas, because, surprise, most of them came from overseas.
Yeah.
And this country's going to be closed for quite a while. We have to... we need more of them. So if people want jobs, STEM guys, come on.
STEM.
Science and math is not that hard. Like, just...
It was for me back in high school, but then again, I'm not really that smart when it comes to the numbers. But
I can explain to you why the Germans did what they did in the Second War, but I can't. but algebra, fuck.
Well, I think that's my main concerns, really. I've got other ones, but just like, I'm just really worried about where this economy is going. I think the other thing actually is probably like the extremes of our political spectrum.
Yep.
Yeah,
like,
actually, yeah.
I think like something like this. The reason I'm worried about the economy is this economy going really south will lead to an extreme political situation in Australia, and I think. Like I'm friends with some communists, some Stalinists, some Trotskyists, some Luxemburgists. Like I know these people, and I probably could guess that most of them aren't really going to start the revolution tomorrow. But there might be one I'm not talking to who might be ready to do it. And if you push these people to a point of even more extreme, because like most of the ones I know are not in like particularly wealthy situations. Some of them are. But most of them are like, on the dole or whatever it may be. So if you push them into a more extreme situation and you radicalize them through like, pushing them to the edge, it could get dangerous.
Yeah.
And the problem is like, they can tell me, the revolution will succeed and we'll do all these amazing things. But what if they don't succeed? What if it all falls apart and they all lose?
Well,
And
this is where my history major comes into play here. Most of them don't.
Yeah.
To give you an idea, if you go onto a Wikipedia page which lists all the revolts and revolutions throughout history, just go to the Roman Empire section between when Carthage fell to when the 3rd century. They all failed because it turns out Roma Aeterna does not give a fuck about your lives.
Yeah.
Because eventually the thing you're fighting against will always be stronger than you, and if you're not united, which a lot of these people aren't, because you mentioned 4 Protestant Marxist branches.
Yeah.
And they all don't agree with each other.
Yeah.
They'll
kill each other first before they'll kill the enemy.
Exactly. I mean, just like the revolution that they masturbate themselves off to, like the 1917 one. What happened in 1917? What happened to the Russian Revolution?
What happened at Kronstadt?
Remember Kronstadt, the green armies, the fact that many peasants revolted against the Bolsheviks.
Yeah.
Like these people have fantasies in their head.
Yeah, and like, look,
rather than looking at the real problems.
I definitely have sympathies to the communist ideal on some level, but I think it's. I think the Soviet Union is very complicated. I think they did some great things, especially early on, and especially there were some certain periods where they did some really effective, amazing things. They also did some horrible things as well. Like that's I think you have to think the Soviets is nuanced, but I think all that be true, but it's missing the window dressing.
you can mention, oh, we're going to have a political revolution, fuck the capitalists. That's all well and good. And you might be poor, but you're not Russian peasant poor, like World War One style.
Yeah.
Like, you're not owned. You can move from Brisbane to Sydney. If
Yeah.
you were a Russian serf, you did not have that luxury because you were owned.
And you're getting sent to the front to fight Germans who are whooping
Yes.
you.
Yeah, half your friends haven't been gunned down in the trenches. Like, I have no sympathy for anyone who actually believes in starting a revolution that will kill lots of people, bring ruin to this country, and think that now's the time to do it. Because the things you're idolizing, they were not as glorious as you think they were.
Yeah, and if you have to really think about it, are you ready to murder, like, you know, possible friends, family? You know what I mean? Because you have to think, like, because it's like to make this work.
Are you that desperate?
I would like to think, you know, there are different communist branches that don't believe you shouldn't just murder people, of course. So I'm not just throwing them all into one group.
That's good to know.
But nonetheless, but you have to think about it. If you want to have this revolution work, you have to make sure that like someone doesn't turn against you. Like the problem with obviously the 1917 one is eventually someone got into power, like Stalin, that I would say betrayed the revolution on some level, like totally warped its intentions and its prospects to a certain degree. But you can't stop. There's almost no way you can stop that from happening if you centralize power, if you gun down certain coalition groups that might be supportive of you. You know what I mean? Like the Mensheviks would have been supportive of Lenin over Stalin. You know what I mean? Or like Trotsky over Stalin. But by the time they got to this point, the groups that could have been there supportive were all gone. Like, you know, you only had your small coalitions left, like the left opposition or Stalin. And Trotsky got outmaneuvered. So.
Also, just a quick tangent point to laugh at this idea, but the revolution had soldiers in it, as in they had Russian soldiers coming back from the Eastern Front who joined them. They had military support. Please tell me if you think any unit of the Australian Army will go, oh yeah, you know what? It's time for a communist revolution. We're going to sack Canberra and turn it into not a roundabout anymore.
There is not even, like, I couldn't think of a less communist group than the Australian Army.
Yes. But it goes, the fact that we're having this conversation, and while it sounds ridiculous at face value, the fact that we are at this point, it's a little concerning. Because one of the big things is, what's the preamble to all of this fuckery? Like for me, I think it's the Americanization of our politics.
Yeah, I think that's a problem.
And 2019
and our culture, I think the Americanization of our culture as well.
Absolutely. But like, while the Americans have many good things to like look up to and aspire to, how they manage their politics in the 20th and 21st century is not one of them. And the problem is that you have the Liberal Party, who is very, very good at winning because they fight to win.
Yeah.
It's one of their best traits in it.
I can vouch for that.
And then you have the Labour Party, and there will be episodes about this in the future about political strategy and election stuff, but Labour fucks up all the time because they try to still be polite in a world that's slowly like fading away.
Yeah, well, I will say though, in the Victorian state election when Daniel Andrews was going, they were talking about a whole bunch of like positive stuff all the time, and like some really positive changes and all that. Now that did work for them eventually in the Victorian state election. However, obviously in the federal one, it ended up being a lot different. Like I think it was on the ABC. I think it was on The Drum or something like that. One political commentator, they were saying like it was as if the Liberal Party were in opposition. Yeah, like they ran the election as if they were in opposition, and it's like, you know, it was constant attack ads after constant attack ads and all that stuff. And then while Labor was like, oh well, here's actually what we're going to do about this and that and blah blah blah, and yeah, I don't know. And plus all this whole quiet Australian thing too, and the whole, you know, little people versus, you know, the big end of town and all that stuff. And it's like,
well, I think. Sorry, I just want to jump in on that. There's like I think the interesting, like, I think that's true. I think it's very true that they acted like they were the opposition, even though they were in government. Because Tony Abbott was doing that after they won in 2013.
Yep.
He was acting like he was still in opposition, like being annoyed at all these things. But if you look now at Trump, what does Trump act like? He's acting like he's in opposition still.
Yep.
He's fighting the evil Democrats who are still in power somehow. You know what I mean? He's trying to like get rid of all the sludge in the government. You know what I mean? And
I have no doubt that ScoMo will probably do the same thing in 2022. Like, because that's how you win. The problem is, those have long-term ramifications when the message you're sending out actually gets taken in by the population. So, as an example, you go with the whole death tax thing, which is whoever actually thought that was real, that's hilarious.
Yeah, well,
I have no real.
I
was
met someone who did think it was a Labour supporter on like a day or a couple of days before the last election. Who was a Labour supporter who was like, why is Labour betraying working people with its death tax? And I was like, where the fuck did you hear this from?
Yeah.
I was like racking my brain going, because like I try and keep politically engaged. I read Australian articles. I don't try and just like keep my own box. But I was like, I'm trying to keep on top of all this news, but where are you hearing this from? And a Labour supporter too. Like she was in her maybe 50s or something, or 40s. So, and she was like, had this whole narrative in her head about like Labour's coming to tax your children after you die. Like I was like, what?
Yeah, the whole issue of taxing too, like that was the whole thing. It was like, oh well, Labor's gonna tax you, and because you're a hard-working Australian, you don't deserve to be taxed like that. Us, the Liberal Party, we're gonna not tax you, and blah blah blah. It's like, there's the thing. It's like, with that whole, I called it the tax war at the time because that's what was going on, right? But they, because the Liberals were going, okay, we're going to have fewer taxes than Labor and all that, and we're still going to keep all of our promises, and then Labor's going to go, okay, well, we'll match your taxes, and we're going to do even better. But I'm just thinking, like, how are you going to fund all your public services that you're advertising that you're going to do better in without the amount of tax that you're going to do? Like eventually, like, more taxes ends up leading to more public services that end up like becoming better. However, less taxes inevitably mean that those public services are going to suffer a bit too. Like, it's a balancing game. It's not always necessarily bad, and that's what I think a lot of people associate tax with. They associate tax as bad, and but not all the time. Like
100%. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when your party comes out and says, "Oh, no new taxes, but you have to balance the books somehow," well, you can see what happens in Australia with John Howard. And by the way, folks, the Liberal government isn't the only one that sells off large amounts of public assets to private entities. The Labour Party has done it as well. Dear old Daniel Andrews, who I bet fantasizes sucking G off already. Okay, look, there is context to that, and I'll have to make a source list as to why I said that.
But yes.
Yeah, anyway, he sold off $30 billion of public assets.
Yeah, didn't
Why?
he sell, I think he sold, he's got the port attached to the Belt Road.
Yeah.
Or something.
And so when any government comes and says, oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but they're not going to increase taxes so that it fills the public coffers so they can fund X, Y, and Z, well, they got to do something.
Yeah.
So you sell public assets. John Howard did the exact same thing. That's how John Howard got us nationally back into black. He didn't do anything special. He just sold off fuckloads of assets, $96 billion of them. The problem is that when you sell off public assets to private entities do not exist for your benefit.
What?
They're not evil.
I've always believed.
By the way, this isn't to say, like, go into some rah-rah corporations a bad thing. No. They're amoral entities. They're designed to make profit. This is any business. Even if you're the greeniest of greenie voter,
you got to make money.
Yeah, if you made a business that planted trees somewhere, well, your objective is to make money. That's the first goal of any business. And so when you sell off to entities that exist purely for profit generation, what do you think happens? Well, people start losing money. Some assets that were previously publicly owned and maintained by taxpayer money is now maintained at the whim of a private company that might go, you know what, our yearly budget says we can't afford to maintain this, so either we increase our prices to maintain this, or this thing's gonna get fucked.
I think we should change subject, but I just want to add one last thing to it.
All that goes to society, which I'll sum it up like this. When you do all of these things, they bleed back. And so when you have an Americanization, rah-rah, fuck taxes, rah-rah, all of this shit, it gets into people's heads.
Yeah.
And when everyone else's lives are getting worse off, but your voter base is perfectly fine. Like in the Liberal Party case, it's the retirees who are really good, and then Labour Party, which has their own rich Elysium excluded types. They're fine. But when the rest of the country's fucked, eventually the dam's gonna break, and so bleeding on effects.
And then that's why we get like those spikes with like say the Greens or One Nation or Clive or whatever. Like we get those spikes in support because like, you know, I believe in the Labour Party ultimately. Like, I think they are, you know, the best option. But like,
Hello
you know,
everyone,
there are
thank you for
failings
listening to
and
our first
failings,
part of our first
leading to the
episode.
situation
We
where
should have our
I
second
don't
part
think
out
anyone
in
sees
a
the,
week or
the
so.
tornado coming.
So
You know what I
thank
mean?
you
Don't
very much
see
for your
this
time.
cyclone that's
Thank
on
you.
the, like, on
Bye.
the horizon.
Is the Prime Minister aware of recent comments suggesting that the 1950s were a time of great advancement for Australia? A golden age for Australia. Can the Prime Minister tell the House whether it's the government's intention to pursue similar outcomes?
About the nature of the Australian population, that they are all a lot of self-seeking people to whose prejudice and greed you only need to appeal and you'll get that reaction. Now, I have a different view about my fellow Australians. It's permeated my opening speech of the campaign and right through. I believe that when Australians are confronted with the facts of crisis, that they have sufficient commitment to this country to respond positively.
That the right to govern this country does not belong to Mr. Rudd or to me or to his party or to ours, but it belongs to you, the people of Australia.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not. And the government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever.
For the complete mobilisation and the complete ordering of all the resources, human and material, in this Commonwealth for the defence of this Commonwealth.
I love Australia. I love Australians. We are the most successful multicultural society in the world.
Today we honour the Indigenous peoples of this land, the oldest continuing cultures in human history.
Australia, some people say, is trailing at the heels of imperialist America.
Well may we say, God save the Queen, because nothing will save the Governor-General.
We all know that Australia is the best country in the world in which to live. Our aim over the next 3 years is to make it an even better country in which to live.
We won't have a bar in it. You can go back to your 50s, to your nostalgia, to your Menzies, the Caseys and the whole lot. They were not aggressively Australian, they were not aggressively proud of our culture, and we'll have no bar of you or your sterile ideology.